Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for coming, and we will have a wonderful environment be based to your present, and we will have some gifts from MCC company here. Okay, I would like to thank MCC as well for providing some giveaways, some plans. I would like to introduce Miss Dana Ahmed. She's an environment engineer working for Bahrain Air Base, and I would like her to continue and introduce herself with wide experience in her life. Please welcome her.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dana Ahmed. First of all, I'm very honored to be here with you today. Thank you so much for coming. Just a bit of background about myself. I graduated from University of Nottingham doing architectural environment engineering, focusing on sustainability within the built environment. And then from that, I worked at the Supreme Council for Environment for almost a year as an environmental specialist in the assessment and control section, where we looked into implementing environmental regulations for projects and investors prior to operations. And now I'm working at Bahrain Airport Company, looking after the environmental performance of the airport, enjoying it a lot, and engaged in the lead targeted certification of the new passenger terminal. So that's it about myself. We'll move into the presentation. So today's presentation will be a brief environmental awareness. I'll start by introducing the topic, and then I'll move to key environmental issues, key environmental commitments and regulations, and finally, I'll be emphasizing about your role. Most importantly, your role and how you can contribute. So to start with, looking at the screen, what can you see on the screen? Fire. Australia. That's correct. I think you deserve a gift.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it was all over the news.
We need a photo with her.
That's later on. Okay. So it was all over the news. Over 15 million hectares of forest and bush was burning in Australia. Staggering amount of almost 1 billion animals have died. What was the reason behind it? Is it purely a natural phenomena, or is human activity behind it? Think about it, and we'll get back to it later. So moving to the presentation, I'll start by introducing the topic. As I mentioned, what is environment? So environment is everything that surrounds us. It's plants, air, water, land, it's humans and their surroundings and interaction with their surroundings. Key environmental issues. So why do we care about the environment? What are the issues out there? What's happening? Here I'll be going through 5 key environmental issues that everyone should know about. The first one is climate change, also known as global warming, اللي هو الاحتباس الحراري بالعربي أو تغير المناخ. So climate change is the global rise in temperature, which is happening due to the emissions of greenhouse gases. What are greenhouse gases? These gases that we emit from our activities, such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxides, methane, and others. So climate change results in extreme weather occurrences. It results in melting of the icebergs, the sea level is rising, we're hearing that flooding is happening everywhere. Kansai Airport was flooded last year, and operations stopped because of that. Bahrain even witnessed it. So it's not just a phenomenon out there, we're living climate change, we're feeling it. Bahrain witnessed the highest temperature in July 2019. last year. Second key environmental issue is pollution. So pollution is the release of any harmful substance to the environment, whether to air, water, land. The Environmental Protection Agency report shows that pollution is directly related to a lot of diseases, such as respiratory diseases, asthma, premature death, and other.
Can you please keep your mobile phone on silent mode, please?
And these are two examples of pollution. We have air pollution and we have land pollution, oil spill leading to groundwater pollution. Moving to the third environmental issue, loss of biodiversity. So what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the variety of species that we have today on Earth, and all species interact with each other in an ecosystem. So humans depend on vegetation, plants, animals. Whenever we affect any of those species, eventually it affects us. Currently in the Middle East, around 1,084 species are threatened, and 20% of that are fishes. So fishes are impacted when we discharge anything to the sea. Other animals are impacted when we take their land, when we chop their food. This is basically all those reasons contribute to loss of biodiversity. Fourth key environmental issue is resource depletion. So on Earth, we have finite number of resources, whether it's water, soil, plants, food. If we keep on exploiting those resources at a high rate without allowing it to regenerate, eventually those resources will finish. So currently Bahrain depends on natural gas for electricity. If we keep on using it at the rate that we're using it now, eventually it will finish. Fifth environmental issue, and it's one of the biggest environmental issues on Earth today: waste. Waste is a very big problem worldwide and in Bahrain. Waste is ending up in land, waste is ending up in oceans. And it's a huge problem in Bahrain specifically because Bahrain is a small island. Currently in Bahrain, all general waste is taken to Askar landfill. Askar landfill occupies 2 million meters square. And it's predicted that in 5 years, Askar landfill will be fully occupied. So what will we do after 5 years? Will we take more and more land to occupy our waste? The World Bank predicts that by 2050, there will be more plastic found in oceans than fish. Moving into environmental commitments and regulations. So what are our environmental commitments at a national level in Bahrain, and what are the main regulations that everyone should know about? So we have international commitments, international agreements that Bahrain is part of, and we also have national commitments. Internationally, we have the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are universal goals that were set basically to get rid of poverty and for climate action of all member states of the UN. Second, we have the Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol, again, is an agreement that Bahrain signed with regards to limiting climate change and emissions of greenhouse gases. Third one is Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement, again, looks into climate change and how to limit temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius. Montreal Protocol is an agreement that Bahrain signed with regards to ozone depleting materials. So this protocol controls chlorofluorocarbons and HCFCs, so hydrofluorocarbons. And the second, actually the fourth agreement that we have on the screen is Basel Convention. So the Basel Convention looks into transboundary movement of waste, of hazardous waste, and all countries that signed it basically in order to control illegal dumping that's happening around the world of hazardous waste. Finally, CITES, Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species, with regards to basically protecting endangered species. So these are some of our international, some of the agreements that Bahrain is part of. On a national level, we have Bahrain Economic Vision of 2030. So Bahrain Economic Vision looks into implementing those SDGs, basically Sustainable Development Goals, and protecting the environment, natural resources, etc. Then we have the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan of Bahrain. We'll talk about it later. We have the National Renewable Energy Action Plan, and we also have environmental regulations by the Supreme Council for Environment. So these are the two National Action Plan. We have the Energy Action Plan of Bahrain, targeting 6% reduction of energy consumption by 2025, compared to the average baseline, which is from 2009 till 2013. And the Renewable Energy Action Plan targets 5% renewables by 2025 and 10% renewables by 2035. Renewables will be a mix of solar, waste to energy, and other renewable sources of energy. So you can find those on the internet and read more about the targets that the government has. Regulations of environment in the Kingdom of Bahrain. So the Supreme Council of Environment sets and implements those environmental regulations. You can visit their website, and this is the hotline for environment. If you see any environmental basically violation, anything that affects the environment, make sure that you report it immediately to the hotline. It can stay as an anonymous if you wish. You can tell them that, and they will make sure that it stays as an anonymous. And you can find more information in the website with regards to conventions, regulations, etc. Now I'll go through 4 key environmental regulations that everyone should know about. So the first one is Legislative Decree of 21 with regards to the environment. So this legislation sets the generic environmental regulations of Bahrain. It prohibits any damage. It sets the protective measures on a generic basis. The second legislation looks into air and water. So if you have any emissions to air, if you have any discharges to water, then you have to look into those standards because they set all the standards for both air and water. Third key environmental regulation, we have Legislative Decree of 7 with regards to chemicals. So this regulation looks into chemicals. It prohibits importing some chemicals that are very dangerous and has like detrimental effects on the environment, and it also sets the standard of handling, storage, and disposal of chemicals. Final regulation is with regards to hazardous waste. So hazardous waste is controlled by the SCE, while general waste is controlled by the municipality. So again, the SCE makes sure that hazardous waste is disposed in a responsible way that doesn't affect humans, doesn't affect the environment. So ladies and gentlemen, these are the key environmental regulations in Bahrain. So a quick recap, the SCE regulates environment, and they ensure that the environment is protected during all time. They set the air and water standard. They regulate chemicals, and they ensure that waste is disposed in a responsible way. Moving into the most important and critical part of this presentation, your role and how can you contribute in all this. So think about, how does your organization affect the environment, and how do you affect the environment on a daily basis and at work? So your role is to ensure that the environment is protected during all times. Utilize resources efficiently, conserve energy and water, and follow the waste hierarchy. So I'll be going through each and every one in details and how can you contribute in each and every one. So first thing is your role in environmental protection. First of all, looking into the screen, what difference do you see between the right side and the left side?
Left side is totally pollution going on, and at the right side, it's environmentally good. Like trees are there.
Yes.
The rainy season is looking out. Then clouds are good.
Actually, both right and left side are reciprocal to each other. If there is no right and left side, we cannot achieve right side.
It's a plan for
No,
future.
I disagree.
It's a plan for future to use the our resources. I mean, natural resources. Okay, like air and sun. Okay, to create some energy instead of using petrol and other stuff.
Yes, correct. So the right side we can see vegetation, solar panels, which symbolizes a healthy environment, and the left side we can see discharges to the sea, polluted discharges to the sea, and we can see air pollution and emissions to air. So we need to ensure that the environment is protected during all times: air, land, and water. So how can we protect land? Avoid contact of any hazardous material with land. Because whatever touches the land, you are basically affecting the soil. Avoid spills to land. For example, always use spill trays. When you store any chemicals, when you store any oil drums, or when you have generators, make sure that you have spill trays, so if any spill occurs, it's contained in a tray. Water, similarly. If you have any discharges to water, make sure that you monitor the quality of water and you're not harming the marine life. Protect the stormwater line, very importantly, because the stormwater line is connected to the sea in most cases. So whatever goes there will reach the sea. So you need to make sure that you don't dispose anything in the stormwater line. Avoid any release of any substances. Sometimes even when we go to the beach, we see people sitting near the beach, using some plastics and polluting without even feeling it. So those practices, we are harming the marine life. We should avoid that. Third, air. Control sources of air emissions and avoid accumulative impact. So what I mean by accumulative impact is sometimes you have more than one source of air emissions. So you have quick equipment, you have emissions from traffic, you have emissions from different sources. So if you can control that, in many cases you can control it. For example, running the routine testing of backup generators. If you simply run if you don't run them, all of them together, you will save the environment. Because if you run them all of them together, the air quality will be basically will be damaged at one time. So simple things that you can do to avoid accumulative impact. Okay, in specific, for any activity that you do, you have to identify the environmental aspects and environmental impacts related to an activity. So what are environmental aspects and impacts? Environmental aspect is basically the activity that you do. The activity or product or services, anything that you do that may have an impact on the environment. Environmental impact is any change in the environment due to the aspect or due to the activity. So let's take some examples of environmental impact and environmental aspects and impacts. We have application of pesticides. Environmental impact will be soil and water quality degradation, fish production, Can anyone guess what the impacts could be?
Depletion of marine resources.
Correct. Thank you. Very good. So the impact is resource depletion, as our friend mentioned. The third aspect is recycling, and the impact is diverting waste from landfill. So again, the impact could be negative or it could be positive. Environmental impact assessment. So environmental impact assessment is used to identify environmental impacts, environmental aspects, and control measures. So the objective of the EIA is to implement mitigation measures, to identify appropriate strategies to monitor impacts, and to aid selection of best option if alternatives are available. So an example of environmental impacts, as we can see on the screen, we have activity is office building. The first environmental aspect is use of water. Environmental impact, depletion of natural resources, control measures, maintenance of water fixtures, and water conservation awareness to staff. Another example, for example, use of paper. We have depletion of resources, and control measure would be electronic communication. This is another example of an EIA template. So an EIA template, or environmental impact assessment template, is similar to a risk template, risk management template. And it's up to the company basically to adapt whatever template they want. Sometimes, for example, in this template we have, I'll go through the example. So we have probability, P stands for probability, S stands for severity. In this template, we have quantitative matrix that is used to basically to set the probability and severity. Sometimes qualitative measures are used. So it depends on the matrix that you follow. It could be 3 by 3 or 5 by 5. Anyway, so moving into this matrix, we have the activity office building, environmental aspect use of water, impact depletion of natural resources, existing controls, preventative maintenance, staff awareness. The probability is 3, the severity is 3, initial risk is 9 according to the matrix. And then additional controls, upgrade of water fixtures to increase efficiency. So those are additional controls in order to limit consumption of water. Therefore, the severity decreased from 3 to 1. So the residual environmental risk has reduced from 9 to 3 because we implemented those controls. So the EIA makes you visualize all your activities and all the controls that you are implementing and all the controls that you could implement in order to reduce the risk level. Another model in environmental management that is very useful is source pathway receptor model. So the source pathway receptor model basically it's used to identify environmental impacts and to basically to find the root cause of impacts. So source of contamination, pathway is the route by which the contamination is traveling to the receptor, and the receptor is anything that can be harmed or damaged. Let's take an example of this model. So we have source, a spill on ground, oil spill for example. Pathway is via the drains. Receptor is rubber. So the aim is to always protect sensitive receptors. Whenever you operate, you need to make sure that sensitive receptors are protected during all times from pollution. Now I'll go through some photos and diagrams of examples of violations: land contamination violation, air and water violations. So as we can see on the screen, this is considered as a land violation because we have spills from oil tanks reaching and penetrating to soil. Similarly, effluents from industrial, from factories, oil spill on ground, spill from cars. Storage. Storage is a very important thing. Whenever you store anything, as I mentioned in the beginning, you need to make sure that everything is stored in an organized way, land is protected from any damage, you have containment, basically trays or tanks or bunds to protect land. And again, basically storage of waste leading to land contamination. And if it rains, it's even worse because whatever contamination is on the surface will penetrate inside the soil and could even reach groundwater. Especially in Bahrain, groundwater is very high. Air contamination violations. So, black smoke emissions is an example of air pollution and evaporation of volatiles. So whenever you're storing any oil and chemicals without covering it, and they contain VOCs, and VOCs will evaporate. Whatever evaporates will affect the air quality and will also affect the atmosphere. So an example of violations, we have black smoke emissions from buses, from generators, and from drums when you don't cover the drums and you allow those VOCs to escape into air. Water contamination violations, so spill from tanks leading to soil, penetrating and reaching groundwater. So with water contamination, it could be via the soil and it could be through direct discharges to surface water, and it could be also through the stormwater line. Because as I mentioned earlier, stormwater line is connected to the sea.
Do you have any idea about the penalties in case of discovering a contractor delivering some waste to the sea? Is there any hotline we can?
Yes, so they will be violated by the Supreme Council for Environment, but if you witness anything of that sort, make sure that you report it. So call the SE immediately, you can report the location, or you can even take a photo and send it to them, and it will stay as an anonymous.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so we discussed your role and how you can protect the environment. Now we'll move into your role in resource utilization. So resource utilization results in saving the environment, saving money, and also saving time. Always track what you consume. Always seek to continuously innovate in order to reduce consumption. Avoid disposables. Sometimes they invest more in capital costs, but you end up basically saving money in the long term, and at the same time reducing consumption. Focus on life cycle assessment. So what is life cycle assessment? Whenever you purchase any product, make sure that you assess the product starting from extraction of raw materials till the disposal of this item. We need to do such an assessment to all products that we purchase every day. Green procurement. Green procurement is so important, and it's a simple thing that you can introduce at your companies and even at home. So whenever you buy anything, make sure that you always look into regional sourced materials in order to avoid emissions with regards to transportation and carbon footprint of the material. Other example of green procurement, materials that contain recycled content, reduced packaging, extended lifetime, higher energy efficiency, materials that can be reused, materials that produce no toxic substance through use. For example, an example of that is when you will buy paint. You have two options, solvent-based paint, water-based. If you purchase the solvent-based paint, you will be emitting volatiles and VOCs through basically using the paint, through application and through the lifetime. While water-based paints, you will be avoiding those toxic emissions. Manufactured in an environmental responsible way. So we need to consider those considerations basically when purchasing anything and make it a habit. For example, for the new terminal building targeting LEED certification, all these are considered. And for any targeted LEED certified building, green procurement is one of the requirements. Your role in energy and water conservation. So we discussed your role into how to protect the environment, how can you utilize resources, and now we'll move into how can you contribute in energy and water conservation. So during your work, always analyze consumption, always implement innovative procedures to reduce consumption. Again, the process owners, the people that are part of maintenance, part of certain processes, they will know more about how to conserve energy and water. So always try to innovate and think how you can reduce consumption for your work. And on a daily basis, simple things that you can do that matters, such as turning off the light when you don't need it, clean your AC filters. Again, many times we forget about that, but whenever you don't clean your AC filters, you have dirt and debris accumulating on the filter, then the air conditioner needs to work more and more to cool your room, consuming more electricity. Third is utilize your AC thermostat. So avoid overcooling. A lot of times in Bahrain, we see that people set the thermostat on 18 degrees Celsius, when it's not really required. If you set it on 23, you will still reach your thermal comfort. Close the door behind you to keep the room cooled. Close the windows blinds during peak heat hours. So during peak heat hours, we have a lot of heat entering the built environment, our rooms, through the windows, through the glass, through the solar radiation. So simple things such as like closing part of the window in order to avoid excessive heat gain, or for example, even installing shading devices at your windows to avoid solar radiation entering basically your rooms and heating it. Grow trees to shade your house. So there's a study that says your house could be actually 10 degrees colder if you just shade your house, because you avoid heating of external walls, you avoid the heating of solar radiation entering via the windows and all these things. Switch off your PCA when not in use. Again, it's something very simple that a lot of people forget to do. And we're just in a habit of putting it to sleep mode and leaving the office. Sleeping mode still consumes energy, so shutting it off is always the better option.
Sometimes it depends on the company's policy. Some of the companies say don't switch off your PC. Some of them it's optional.
Yeah.
So they have to respect the company policies in
Yes,
this case.
of course.
But at home there is no excuse.
So moving to water conservation. Do not waste any water unnecessarily. Again, we see a lot of people, for example, when they wash their garages in our neighborhood, and they splash water here and there without feeling, feeling it. In Bahrain, we don't have natural water. We use a lot of energy in order to convert seawater via the desalination plants to potable water that we can use. So we need to take care of these things and make sure that we don't use unnecessary water. Rectify any leaking taps. Whenever you have any leakage, make sure you take action. If you see anything, make sure you report it. Fourth, your role in waste management. So I'll play a short video.
8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the sea from land every year. the equivalent of 5 plastic bags filled with trash for every foot of coastline in the world. Across our ocean, plastic trash flows into circulation, dispersed almost everywhere, but concentrating in huge swaths in the midst of global currents, breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces, ingested by species across the marine world, and sinking to the bottom of the sea.
Anyone can make plastic anywhere in the world and sell it anywhere else in the world. There's no design paradigm, there's no barriers. In order to solve the plastic packaging problem, we need to effectively rethink the entire system. From one which is linear, i.e. take, make, dispose, to one where it can be recovered and fed back into the economy as a valuable plastic material, all one where it is biobenign and it can enter the environment. The ultimate goal of the new plastics economy is to design an economy where plastic packaging never becomes waste. And to do that, we need every single player in the chain to change the way that they do things.
But marine pollution comes in many forms. Industrial, agricultural, and urban waste also sweep into the sea, fueling explosions of algae that rob marine ecosystems of the oxygen they need to survive. With sustained pollution, these areas become dead zones, which already exist in more than 400 locations across the globe. But nutrient pollution can be managed through change in major contributing systems like agriculture.
If you eat, you're involved in agriculture. So it's a problem that all of us have to work together to solve. Soil health is critical for water quality. It's the first thing we have to focus on. Here on the farm, organic matter is the key thing that we try to improve. The more organic matter you have in the soil, the better the soil can hold on to nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen. Organic matter keeps it from leaching out of the soil. It grabs onto it, and that's good for the farmer, but it's also good for water quality in the bay. For any farmer to change their system is tricky, and it takes a lot of work. I think all farmers want to. It's learning different processes, practices that allow you to do it effectively that becomes a key.
Okay. So waste, as I mentioned in the beginning, is a very big problem worldwide and in Bahrain due to the size of Bahrain. On a general basis, whenever you generate any type of waste, make sure, especially if it was industrial waste, make sure that it's disposed according to the set environmental regulation and it's not disposed as general waste. So this is, I wanted to share this because it's very important to have the Supreme Council of Environment Waste Manifest whenever you generate any industrial waste. So the manifest keeps track and a record of how you disposed your waste. It has the signature of the waste generator, the waste transporter, and the Supreme Council for Environment, and they provide you with the best available technology or the best available basically disposal area or disposal or treatment depending on the type. And finally, the receiver. So we hear a lot of illegal dumping these days. By having this form and keeping it with you, you make sure that whatever leaves your premises is disposed in an environmental responsible way. And you'll keep the record for that. So another manifest is Hafira manifest. So Hafira is the hazardous landfill in Bahrain. So I mentioned earlier about Askar landfill, which is for general waste in the beginning. Second landfill is Hafira, which is for hazardous waste. So this manifest is used for Hafira in specific. So the landfill is controlled by the SCE, and they accept hazardous waste that cannot be treated or cannot be recycled or cannot be basically dealt with other than it has to go to the landfill, and it can't go to the general landfill. It has to go to this hazardous landfill that is designed to basically cope with the hazardous waste. So examples of hazardous waste is used oil, fluorescent lights, and incandescent lights. So why is fluorescent considered as hazardous waste? Does anyone have any? Why is fluorescent considered as hazardous waste?
Because the material it contains inside the fluorescent light has chemical. So that chemical will affect the environment as well. Some of them, they are very poisonous.
Correct. So it contains mercury. So mercury, basically, this is why it can't go with general waste because it contains mercury. Incandescent lights contain heavy metals, again, which is harmful to the environment. Paint, batteries, sludge, expired chemicals, lubricants, electronic waste, again, because they contain heavy metals.
What about hospital waste hazard?
Yes, medical waste is usually incinerated in Bahrain, and there is also transportation form manifest for medical waste.
But where is it disposed? I mean, the
It's
medical
incinerated.
Incinerated where? In Asad itself?
No.
There is my company.
Bahrain waste.
But here, I just click on my mind. What about we use chemicals at home, right? Most of them, none of the people who was using this chemical are reading the chemicals.
Yes.
So after this chemical disposal, we suggest to the government they have some containers so all the families can drop all the cans, for example, instead just with general waste and directly to the sea.
True, I agree with you. But I think it's important for us to always look into how we can contribute rather than just wait for the government to implement things. So there are recycling companies in Bahrain. You can start segregating waste at your home. Contact those recycling companies and they will come collect your waste, or you can go to their places and just basically give them your waste. The list of recycling companies is at the SCE website.
We have one champion also here.
So always look into how you can contribute. Example of waste violation, when you mix industrial waste with general waste. So we can see here we have some cans, we have food, which is not acceptable.
I have one question.
And yes.
This is not controlled.
Oops.
I'm an architect, I'm on construction site,
Yeah.
and any kind of skip, or 95% or 99% or maybe 99.9% of the skips are usually contaminated with mixed waste,
Yes.
which has hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste.
Yeah.
And there is no, unfortunately, proper control. And in Europe or in Germany specifically, once you segregate the waste, you pay per skip maybe 10, 15 or 20 BD. Once you have mixed waste, you pay 200-300 BD.
Yeah.
So the system somehow should be implemented in a very near future in order to avoid these kind of things, because the people in general, they don't understand what is hazardous waste. As you said, they don't read at all. And the contractor or even the consultant, the developer, need to be educated in this manner.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. There are gaps, a lot of gaps, but we always see what we can do. Awareness, spreading awareness, making people basically contribute without having the system there, it's still better than nothing. So this is what we try to do. We try to promote people to do such things from themselves, to start segregate, to start contacting those companies, because for example, me, I can't change the world. I can't set those policies, but I can affect people. So this is what we want. We can do simple things to contribute. That's it. I hope I answered your... Okay, so always ensure that you implement the waste hierarchy during your work and also at home. So the waste hierarchy is the best practice in waste management, and it starts by preventing waste generation, reusing, recycling, recovery, and finally disposal. So whenever you implement the hierarchy, you prevent generation of waste, or you recycle, you are avoiding waste ending up in landfills. So this landfill could be Askar landfill. You never know. Main outcomes of waste hierarchy. So we have environmental benefits. You will be utilizing resources, saving land and space, preventing pollution. Economic benefits, saving transportation costs and generating revenue. So whenever basically you start segregating waste at your company, you will be saving on transportation costs. Because whenever you have a transporter, you need to pay the transporter to take the waste to the landfill. But whenever you have an agreement with a recycling company, in most cases you don't really need to pay them because they come and collect the items and they turn them into products. A lot of times they pay you back, especially when it's metals and used oil, things like that. So last year in BAC we recycled 1.2 tons of plastic. I don't know if you heard of it, was on the news.
What did you
Supporting,
do?
sorry.
You said you recycled
1.2 tons of plastic.
What did you do with the recycled material?
So we appointed a recycling company, and they take it, they do like some partial treatment, and then they export it to be turned into usable products.
One question? Sorry?
Yeah.
Which kind of recycling company? And you said MBC or what? Your group?
Yes,
BAC, Bahrain Airport Company.
Ah, BAC, yeah, very good, very good.
So, yeah, supporting Bahrain's economy. Because from trash, you know, some companies are working with the waste and turning it into reusable materials, so you are supporting Bahrain's economy. It's very important, especially if you have businesses and if you're part of a company. Social benefits, you'll gain some public recognition, and you will also encourage best practice among the community. Examples of inert recyclable waste, or inert, which is unhazardous waste, is paper, cardboard, plastic, metal, used tires. Further improvement of waste management. So if you, at your company or at home, whenever you want to start, you know, implementing the waste hierarchy, start preventing waste, recycling, from where do you start? So I'll be going through two phases that will help you implement the waste hierarchy. First stage is data collection. We cannot improve what we don't monitor. So the first thing is to collect data to start monitoring. Second phase is actions for improvement. So the first phase comprises of identifying all the sources of waste. You list all the activities that leads to waste. And then identify different types of waste related to activities, quantities, and disposal practice. Once you have gathered all this information, you move into phase 2, which is you review, you reflect, and look into each and every activity and look into where is waste going and how you can prevent, recycle, reuse, etc. So a summary of phase 1. This is an example of phase 1. You will have the sources, for example, offices, location of generation is XY building, type, plastic bottles, quantity, waste segregated, in this case, yes, transporter, ABC, disposal practice, recycling, final waste destination, this company. Second example, for example, it goes to the landfill. Waste from the warehouse and it ends up in the landfill. So you have all your activities and where it ends, where is the final, the destination of waste, and how is it disposed. Moving to phase 2, you start implementing the waste hierarchy flowchart. So you start by going into each and every activity and basically studying whether if you can prevent waste, if yes, provide the details, if no, move into reducing, and then moving into reusing, recycling, and you will be providing the details of each and every step in the hierarchy. So by the end of phase 2, you will have those informations. So the source and type and quantity, the first 3 columns, you already identified them in the first phase of the project, which is data collection. Now you move into, can you prevent this waste? For example, plastic water bottles, can you prevent them? In this case, it was yes. Therefore, the rest is not applicable. The detail is Provide employees with reusable glass water flasks to replace the use of plastic bottles. Another example, we have warehouse, waste from the warehouse, plastic sheets from packaging, quantity 3 kg. Can waste be prevented? No, in this case. Can it be reduced? Yes. Reused? No. Recycled? Yes. So it can be reduced and it can be recycled. The details are as such: 1 kg of plastic sheets reduced by contacting the supplier to reduce plastic packaging. Remaining 2 kg is recycled by appointing ABC company. So by the end of phase 2, all your waste will be either prevented, reused, reduced, or recycled. You will be diverting all waste from the landfill. Overview on key steps to implement recycling. First of all, the first step is to appoint a recycling company approved by the SCE to carry such an activity of recycling. Usually, the recycling company, they're in charge of supplying waste containers, and they're in charge of collecting those waste. Second is dedicate area for different types of waste containers. Again, number 2 is easy because you already collected all the data. You already know the sources of waste, the activities that leading to waste. So you will know how many, what are the locations that you need to set the targets. Finally, carry out staff awareness. It's very important, whether it's staff awareness, whether it's awareness at home. If you just put recycling containers without awareness, it will not succeed. You have to tell people the reason behind recycling, why they should recycle, in order to encourage it and in order for it to succeed. So your contribution is important. Your contribution in managing and reducing waste, your contribution in conserving energy and water, reducing emissions through, for example, of transportation, emissions from anywhere. Your contribution is very important for a cleaner environment. So the ultimate aim is to achieve sustainability, to make sure that whatever we do today doesn't affect the future generations. So it's a balance between social, economic, and environment. It's the development that reaches the needs of the current without compromising future generations. So think, what can you do to contribute? So the only way forward is for us to work together for a brighter future, to save our environment, to do whatever we can do to contribute إن احنا نساهم بأي طريقة حتى لو كانت بسيطة حق البيئة. شكرا.